Number the man who built a creek and got fined for it back in 2007. A vet who'd spent his whole career on cats and dogs bought 140,000 acres of high desert in eastern Oregon and set about packing a dry channel with rock. Not a river. A gully knife 6 feet into a valley floor, bone dry 11 months a year, fishless for longer than any living person could recall. He trucked in rock, gravel, and juniper trunks and heaped them into low, seeping mounds, about 100 of them, strung along 3.5 miles of a stream called Camp Creek. His name is Scott Campbell. He'd helped grow a nationwide chain of animal hospitals and cashed out his stake the year he took on the ranch, a wedge of ground between Burns and John Day, about 300 highway miles southeast of Portland, ringed by the Malheur National Forest. The state fisheries office had questions about what he was piling up, so did the water regulator. Locals watched a rich man cart debris into an empty ditch and drew their own conclusions. Then a notice came from the state. It said he owed money for unlawfully reshaping a waterway, since by then the ditch had turned into a creek. It flowed in August. It carried trout, and a dry ravine in eastern Oregon belongs to whoever holds title to the ground. But a creek that flows year-round and holds fish is water of the state of Oregon, and shifting material through it needs a permit. Campbell had never held one. He never could have. On the day he began, there was nothing there to permit. He had built the very thing that turned his own labor into a crime. 6 years on, in the summer of 2015, a prescribed burn slipped its leash across that country and took thousands of acres of sagebrush and dry grass. It swept down the draw toward the ranch, reached the valley where all that stone had gone in, and went out. The people who witnessed it are the same ones who raised the structures, a pairing worth keeping in mind. But the fight that notice touched off didn't end with a fine. Begin with a ditch, since no one dug it. That valley had been plumbed once by men who never meant to plumb a thing. Beaver were cleared out of this country on purpose in the 1820s. Under a Hudson's Bay company seemed to scrape the interior clean, so American trappers would find nothing worth the journey. Peter Skeen Ogden, a trapper who crossed the Silvies drainage back then, reckoned it once held some 200,000 beaver. What left with them was a piece of pipework. Pull the dams and the creek's shape shifts. A creek checked every few hundred feet, fans sideways, sheds its sand and gravel, and stays broad and shallow. A creek that nothing checks moves fast, and fast water excavates. It saws into its own bed. The banks climb higher. The flat ground that once flooded each spring ends up marooned 6 feet over the water. Scientists label that channel in size. A rancher labels it a ditch. Then came the cattle herds of the 1880s, cropping the bank plants that lace the soil together. Then a century of stamping out every fire, letting western juniper march across millions of acres it had never governed. Juniper drinks, and it drinks hard. Too many cattle, too little fire, too many trees. By the year Campbell showed up, the Silvies Valley was catching the same rain it caught in 1800 and shedding all of it by July, the part most people get backwards about desert country. The trouble was never how much water came. Campbell walked those creeks and reached a conclusion that marched him straight into the permit office. Plenty of water came each spring. It just never lingered long enough to count. Picture a gutter and a sponge. Rain striking a gutter is gone inside 10 minutes. The same rain on a sponge is still there the next day and bleeds back out slowly as long as any remains. A valley floor with a high water table is a sponge. One with the trench slit through it is a gutter. Same sky, same rain, and by August, wildly different quantities of water. So Campbell started stacking stone, all of it hauled off his own ground. Each mound rose a few inches proud of the floor, so high water spills over the crest instead of boring through the core. The largest hold better than 1,000 cubic yards. The typical one is closer to 200. The spacing rule is tedious but precise. One structure per foot the creek drops, which on steep terrain runs to more than 100 in a mile. Campbell tallied 54 miles of ruined channel on his land. Nobody filed for a permit. Nobody knew one existed. Under Oregon law, shifting more than 50 cubic yards of material through waters of this state demands a removal through fill permit, and these inward draining creeks are state water. The Wildlife Agency layered fish passage rules on top. None of it was silly. Each rule is on the books because somebody once ruined a wetland and walked off clean. Drawn up to snag damage, they snagged repair instead. Because the statute had no category for a man coaxing a waterway into being, the state levied a fine. The coverage back then called it modest and noted he kept his dams. That should have shut the experiment down. It didn't, because by then the stone was already doing its job, and why it worked is stranger than the fine. The trait that makes these structures work is the one that makes them look busted. They leak. A concrete dam is a wall. Water one side, none the other. These are more like a coarse sieve. Water shoulders through the gaps, slowed but not stopped. And while it's being slowed, it pushes sideways and down into the gravel of the valley floor. People eye a beaver pond and see a basin of water. The basin sits beneath it, soaked ground shielded from sun and wind, moving at walking pace. A pond might hold a few thousand gallons. The wet ground it charges holds far more and doles it back all summer, long after the melt. This way the county. Lift the water table and grass that browned in June stays green into September. Keep the grass green and the roots grip the bank and the creek quits cutting. Now the objections, since everyone raises the same ones. Won't a stagnant pond heat up and silt in and finish the fish? That was the forecast. The reverse occurred. Water draining through gravel instead of baking on top steadies temperature, and the silt earns its heat anyway. Sediment banking behind each structure is how a creek bed climbs back toward the land alongside it. Won't a damn barfish headed upstream? Michael Pollock and colleagues tagged juvenile fish on a Klamath tributary and shifted them below the structures. 91% of the coho and 54% of the steelhead were back above them within 3 weeks. A fish that cleared one of these once can clear it again. If you pen water up here, are you taking it from the neighbor down there? An Oregon water right is legally held property, so the question is fair. The Property and Environment Research Center reports more water leaving the ranch and arriving later in the season, though that leans on the ranch's own numbers, not an independent agency. And why not simply turn beavers loose and skip the rock? One Oregon study found 78% of relocated animals wandered off. A beaver needs a shallow creek with willow on the banks. Dumped in a bare trench, it has no food, no cover, no way to build. The habitat has to come first, which leaves the question the fine really hinged on. Does it work? Sylvie's has a real weakness there, and the Forest Service says as much. The research note on this ranch by Rachel Davey, Susan Charnley, and Hannah Gasnell records that nearly every gain is reported by the owner. No baseline readings, no control site. The solid proof for the method comes from Bridge Creek, 100 miles to the northwest, where Nick Bowes and colleagues ran it as a controlled trial and published survival and production gains against an untreated watershed. A tale worth its own telling, one this channel has told already. What Sylvie's had instead was a price. Engineered stream repair gets quoted by the structure and climbs into 6 figures a mile. The Forest Service put Campbell's method under 20,000. That gulf is why a rancher would try it without asking a soul first. What nobody had figured in was what the valley would do next. Campbell built for grass and stockwater. That was the whole business case. The valley had its own agenda. Red band trout turned up first in the Sylvies River and in Camp Creek and Hay Creek, in reaches where the State Wildlife Agency holds no historical record of fish. Nobody put them there, then the beavers returned. Not trucked in, not released. They walked in once the ranch quit trapping and the creeks grew worth inhabiting. The Forest Service note describes a plain increase and refuses to name a big fear. That's the part the stone piles were truly built to trigger. A structure a man tends needs a man forever. A structure a beaver adopts gets tended every night free. The rock was an invitation, and in time something accepted. None of that was the shock. The shock came the summer the burn broke into Camp Creek country. The fullest telling is Martin Doyle's, writing for that same research center. A fire that had already devoured over 5,000 acres and a wet valley floor the flames couldn't cross. It burned itself out. The Forest Service note verifies none of those figures. No acreage, no structure count, not even a year, pieced together from interviews pointing to the summer before. What it does record is the ranch manager saying that, in its former state, the valley could never have banked enough water to halt the fire, and it would have run for many more miles. That's a witness recounting something that never took place. The measurement lives elsewhere, and it answers what anyone who's watched a wildfire on the news asks first. Fire leaps rivers. It leaps 4-lane highways. How does a damp meadow halt anything? Because fire doesn't move through water. Fire moves through fuel. Sedge and rush rising out of soaked ground in August are packed with water inside living cells. A grass fire has to boil that water off before it can burn the plant, and it can't muster the heat to do it fast enough. The green ribbon acts as a fuel break built of living tissue. Emily Fairfax and Andrew Whittle measured this across 5 big western wildfires in their 2020 paper, Smokey the Beaver, reading plant greenness off satellite imagery. The dip in greenness during a fire ran, on average, 3.05 times deeper without beavers than with them. Fairfax is plain about the ceiling. It buys resistance, not recovery. Greenness sprang back the following year whether beavers had been present or not. 20 years on, the Forest Service counts around 640 structures across 18 miles of the Silvies River and 6 feeder creeks. Other tallies land lower, counting different years by different rules, and somewhere inside that count sits an objection that's been mounting since the 1880s. Cattle wreck these valleys. There are 4,000 head on this ranch. Isn't this the same story on replay? The difference comes down to how long the animal stays. What broke these bottoms was season-long grazing. The same herd in the same wet meadow from spring clear to snow. Year after year, never letting the bank plants bounce back. Silvies runs them short and moves them on. Herds are pushed through a pasture and pulled off. Meadows raised late and briefly, some ground fenced out. That claim traces to the owners too, and nobody has checked it on their own. But the arithmetic under it is Campbell's, and it's the sentence that swayed other ranchers. He gave up an acre that's now swamp and gained 6 acres of good pasture that hadn't been good pasture before. 1 acre down, 6 up on a working cattle outfit. That closes the debate. Then the phone rang. A rancher out past Paulina, asking not how to build the things. Anyone can pile stone, but how to steer them past the permit office. The first bill died in 2015 for lack of long-term data. Its sponsor had accepted campaign money from Campbell and said it hadn't swayed him, and both facts are on the record. The second died in 2019. The third held. Governor Kate Brown signed House Bill 2298 in May of 2021. Creating a state program for what the law calls environmental restoration weirs and lifting the permit that had snagged Campbell. The guardrails are tight by design. Only incised streams in eastern Oregon's closed basins, none where healthy runs of native fish already dwell. Fish passage wherever fish are present, and each structure only large enough to shove water onto the old floodplain at ordinary high flows. Now the far side, because it earns a proper hearing. Water Watch of Oregon, which has tracked every one of these bills since 2015, fought the first 2. Its objection to the third is the proof, not the method. It was pitched as a 10-year pilot to demonstrate that these structures work, and what it asks of a project owner is photo monitoring. 10 years of photos won't settle whether these weirs help or harm channel incision, streamside plants, fish counts, or water quality. The very hole the Forest Service flagged at Silvies now inked into state law. And there's the detail that makes this an argument between serious people. That same group backed a separate bill that struck beavers from Oregon's predator list, which passed in 2023 and took effect in July of 2024. Their quarrel is with sparing structures from measurement. So where does it land? Strip it down to everything documented at Silvies. Hundreds of structures, trout and beavers back at a fraction of engineered cost. Reported by the owners and never checked by anyone else. How far the water table climbed, how much forage was won, and the fire. Still unknown and now legally cleared to stay unknown for another decade. What these structures do to a whole watershed, gauged properly over time, the Forest Service has issued its own caution. The summary by Gordon Grant and Susan Charnley treats this field as a cautionary tale as much as a success story. Results swing wildly between watersheds. The dams jam road culverts, drown hay fields, and kill yard trees. In the wrong valley, they burst and do nothing but shove gravel around. Stand today at a lower reach of Camp Creek, where the fire quit and the line is still legible in the dirt. On one side, gray sage-brush skeletons and thin grass on baked ground. On the other, earth soft enough to swallow a boot, water you can hear under the sedge, and a creek with no business flowing in August in a place this dry. 2 landscapes, one sky, split by a few hundred yards and a few hundred piles of rock. And a fine for raising the second one, which leaves a question worth lingering over. If the rules we raise to stop harm can equally stop repair, who ought to get to draw the line? The agency that can measure it, or the person standing in the creek? And how would either one prove it to the other? And if you're wondering what happens when someone runs this same idea with a checkbook the size of a small nation, you need to see what happened in Montana. A billionaire bought a ranch that had been grazed into the ground. He didn't restock it with cattle. He didn't fence it off and walk away. He turned 45 bison loose on it and let them work the place the way they worked it before anyone showed up with a fence. What that herd did to the grass, the water, and the worth of the land itself is the part nobody saw coming.